On today's show, the Hawks get blown out in Game 82. Trae Young is now the franchise record holder for career assists, and Vit Krejci is still on a two-way contract. We'll get into all of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1694 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland. Coming to you on a Sunday afternoon, and today's show is brought to you by the folks at Monopoly Go. I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, which is a mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go right now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Also, I want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. On the video side, it's been a very busy season for the Hawks. I've been here the entire way. And by the way, we don't stop now or even at the end of the playoffs. We're always going to be here throughout the offseason, et cetera. And a busy week for sure. Certainly want to encourage everybody to catch up on the latest across the podcast archive. But today is going to be kind of a three-pronged approach. Number one, the Hawks lost the season finale by 42 points. It was meaningless from start to finish as far as the standings are concerned for Atlanta. They were huge underdogs as a result of that. It got pretty ugly at times. We'll get into all of that. Also, Trae Young became the franchise record holder for career assists, despite the fact that he's only 25 years old. And then, yes, the lead topic of this podcast is not either one of those things. In fact, it centers on a previously not super well-known player in some circles, and an interesting story is sort of nuanced and basketball nerdy, but also impactful at the same time. So if you missed it the last couple of weeks, I've talked about this quite a bit, but coming into the weekend, there was a lot of attention paid to whether Vit Krejci was going to be eligible to play in the postseason, which includes the play-in that starts on Wednesday for the Hawks. It's as simple as this. If Krejci remained on a two-way contract, he would not be eligible for the postseason, again, including the play-in. Because the Hawks have a full roster, there was an extra step that had to kind of be in the mix there for Atlanta, because they would have had to waive someone in order to have any sort of chance to have Krejci be on a full contract. Most likely, Trent Forrest would have been in the sort of path there if they chose to do that. And then beyond that, there were two ways the Hawks could proceed with regard to Vit Krejci's contract. If they were to create a roster spot, they could either, number one, sort of convert him, I should say, to a rest of season deal. Crucially, that could be done unilaterally on their own without any approval from Krejci. They could just turn a two-way contract into a rest of season contract and do that on their own, basically up until 1 o'clock today. No negotiation, just straight up conversion. Or path number two is that the Hawks could, in theory, give Krejci a multi-year contract in negotiation with him and his agent. They have to settle on a number, all that, the normal negotiation kind of pathway. But again, have to have a roster spot available to do any of that. But in the end, the Hawks elected to stand pat. They didn't cut Trent Forrest. They did not do anything with Vit Krejci's contract. And because of that, the season for Vit Krejci ended today. The Hawks continue to play on Wednesday and maybe beyond that. But Vit is now done. He cannot play in the postseason. Even if the Hawks keep winning, nothing can change. He is now done after Game 82. So on the analysis front here, I'll begin with this. The Hawks messaged some of this, with reported and sourcing through Lauren Williams of the AJC, who does a good job on the beat over at the AJC. And to be clear, right now, I am not picking on Lauren. Be very clear about that. I like Lauren. We're friendly. She did her job here. It's not her fault. Anything about what I'm about to say. I heard some of the same stuff, by the way, from the Hawks, but she heard them first, passed them along, reported them, as she should as the beat writer of the team. So all that said, I don't really buy what the Hawks are selling on this one. They're spinning it in some ways as flexibility for the future. I don't really think that passes the smell test, honestly. One point that they made to Lauren was that they would be now allowed to sign Vit Krejci to a 4-year deal this summer, which is longer than they could go now. Now, if take that at face value, that is functionally true. If they were to give him extension now, it would have started this year and gone up to 4 years, but it's only 3 years beyond this year. So if that happens, if they sign Vit to a 4-year contract, it will make this look a little bit better. But I kind of doubt that was the only reason why they didn't do this. With that said, I think a lot of people, fans, maybe even a team as well, are a little bit too sure of how good Vit is or how important he is for the future after a pretty small sample size. This is still a guy who signed on a two-way contract and was a free agent in the middle of this year. That's how he was able to sign with the Hawks. He was a free agent. But all that said, he has done a good job for about 6-7 weeks now playing a lot of minutes for the Hawks. He's improved defensively. He's got a lot of interesting traits as a passer and playmaker, good feel for the game. I like Vit quite a bit. There's a reason he was drafted where he was drafted, and he's been getting some chances that he is very talented. Plus, on the other side of things, if the Hawks were that sure about wanting to sign Vit to a 4-year deal, you would also believe that they might want to have him for the playoffs for this year. So anyway, that's an interesting kind of point there. Then there's a key factor on his pending free agency, which I think people are kind of misunderstanding a little bit. Krejci would have been a restricted free agent either way. Now, if they signed him to a long-term contract, he would not be a free agent at all. But if they converted him, or what they actually didn't do, which was stand pat, he would be the same level of free agency. Restricted means that the Hawks can match any offer. Now, I won't get super nerdy here. There is one small difference on this, essentially, in that if they had given Krejci a rest of season contract today, his qualifying offer would have been the minimum, which is not a big contract, but they would at least had to offer that on a two-way. All they have to do to make Vit restricted is to offer him another two-way. Now, I think given all of what I just said about how much the Hawks seem to like him, his leverage, the way he's played this year, I think that it would be pretty surprising to me and anybody else if they ended up getting him back on a two-way in year 4. That would surprise me, but that's the only kind of small note there that could be different. Now, if you want to be very, very generous to the Hawks, there are 2 ways to kind of do that. You could say on one side that they somehow really value Vit's qualifying offer being that small, especially of what I always said. But again, I don't believe that's probably going to be the case. They're outright messaging that they want to sign him to a 4-year deal anyway, so that's not really believable, but I guess it's possible. Then you could also say they wanted the rights to have restricted free agency on both Vit and Trent Forrest this summer, which this does allow, to be fair. Now, I like Trent quite a bit. In fact, I know I'm higher on Trent than most people are because I like his defense and I value that. But respectfully, there's not going to be a huge bidding war for Trent Forrest this summer. The Hawks are not going to need his match rights. They could probably bring him back on a minimum contract next year. If they were to cut him, yes, he'd be unrestricted, but they could bring him back if they wanted to. I'll say that. That's kind of where I'll leave it, but that is not a huge factor in my view. Overall, people ask me kind of what I feel about this. I would say I don't like what the Hawks did here. They didn't handle this well, in my opinion. I am not totally enraged in the way that some fans are about this, because it does take, this is important, it takes 2 sides to tango on a long-term deal. A lot of the responses I got were, why didn't the Hawks sign him to a multi-year contract? Well, the player side has to agree to that. So that side of things, we'll never know probably all the extent of this, but there was a negotiation, I understand. At least there was a call made at some point between the Hawks and Krejci on a multi-year deal. I don't know where that broke down, but it does take both sides on a long-term deal. But, big but, if they couldn't find a deal that worked for both sides right now on a long-term deal, the Hawks, in my view, still should have A, waived Trent Forrest, and B, converted Vit Krejci to a deal that would have allowed him to play in the playoffs. That's my opinion, and I think that's the logical middle ground of what should have happened here. Again, there might be some new car sheen on Vit right now. I'd be less sure of his full-on breakout as other people might be right now, but at the same time, he definitely helps them in the moment. They have Jalen out, they have Sadiq out, they have Onyeka out. He would have played in the game on Wednesday, and if they won on Wednesday, he would have played on Friday too. So it's tough to sort of circle that for a team that's been in kind of win now mode all year. Like Quinn's coached in win now mode all year long, and Vit would help them. And he's not going to be available to play now. There's another read here. If you want to take it, it's kind of cynical, but the Hawks are not doing the thing that would have maximized their win probability in the play-in. That's true, in my opinion. Now, I don't think that there's a huge 5-point swing from Vit to no Vit this week on Wednesday, but it could matter. The Hawks had, for me, a better chance to win on Wednesday if they had Vit Krejci than if they don't. Now, it's not like the same thing as having Trae or DeJounte or Hunter or whoever, or Capella, whoever else, but having Vit and not having Vit does matter, I think, on Wednesday. Considering that they're the 10 seed and they have 3 of their top 8 guys hurt right now, someone on the organization, I don't think it's Quinn, I think it might be somebody in the front office or something like that, may not believe that it's quote-unquote worth it to kind of do this. And yes, I would agree. They're not super likely to make a huge playoff run here. But to bring it full circle, the entire quote-unquote price of converting Vit, at least converting him to a contract that would have allowed him to be playoff eligible, would be to waive Trent Forrest. Again, that's not nothing, but I would have done that, number one. I would have thanked Trent for his service, explained it to him, why this happened, and then if you want to bring Trent back, I know Quinn loves Trent, the whole team likes Trent, and I don't blame him. He's a really good, valuable piece to have. You could have brought him back next summer pretty easily, I think. So they didn't do that. That's where I'll leave it for now. I get why people are bothered by this. I don't believe that. I think this definitely makes the Hawks a little bit worse on Wednesday. Long term, the impact is not huge. If they want to sign Vit to a contract this summer, they can do that. If they want to match the contract that somebody else offers him, they can do that. They have his match rights. They can negotiate with him. I think he'll be around beyond this year. But for the short term, I don't think they handle this very well, and I'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll have more on this when it comes to the actual Game 82 analysis, as well as Trae's record and much more. But first, a word from our friends at Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes it get tickets even faster and easier at Game Time. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest possible price guarantee. And it's a fantastic option across the board. Make things easy for you at Game Time. I've been a regular user of the app for quite some time now. It's come in handy for me a lot of different times. We're looking for tickets for the Braves or the Falcons, etc., locally, even concerts, etc. And you can save 6% off when it comes to buying last minute tickets for sports and concerts and comedy and theater and much more. They have flash deals. You can save as much as you want to when it comes to choosing a section and letting Game Time choose the seats for you. They have an awesome feature where you can toggle to show up the totals up front as well. No surprise fees when you get to checkout. That's very useful for people like me, I would say. Get a panoramic view of your seats in the app before you buy, and you are also getting the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will actually credit 110% of the difference in that price. Your purchase will be covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the industry, including event cancellation protection and on-time ticket delivery. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and do that promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. I definitely admit that I have a competitive side to me for sure. I think we all do on this on some level. My competitive side is also a big fan of the Monopoly Go game. I'm sure you've heard of it because it's been downloaded about 150 million times. 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you just play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part, honestly, is being able to mess with your friends. It's always fun. I can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon happens to be. Not just my competitive side loves it as well. Team up with your friends, with people all over the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. Get in the game right now and join your friends by downloading Monopoly Go. You can do it now for free on the App Store or Google Play. One more time, download the Monopoly Go app today. All right, and to Game 82, as the Hawks finished up things in Indianapolis on this Sunday afternoon. They elected to rest Clint Capella along with all of their injured players, so they only had 11 guys active for this game. People asked me even pregame why Trae and DeJounte and Bogey and Hunter were playing, because the game didn't mean anything, and that's a perfectly reasonable question. That's the first thing I'll say. A lot of guys across the league were sitting on teams that didn't necessarily need to play and need to win. A reasonable question, and again, there's two answers here, basically. Number one is that the Hawks just practically couldn't sit everyone because they only have 11 guys available with all of those guys that they have injured. That's part of the reason you have to have at least 8 to play a game, and you want probably more than that to just comfortably play a game. So that's why they didn't sit all of those guys. They sat Clint, which I definitely endorse. I probably would have rested Bogey personally if I had to pick one more guy to sit, or maybe Hunter, whatever it's going to be, but that's part of this. And number two is that, of course, Trae missed a long time. Hunter missed some time in there as well. They probably want those guys to play together a little bit. I would say, Trae in particular wants to get his wind back, his conditioning back. I had no issue with them playing Trae. As we get to later on, they played guys longer than I would have, as usual in this game. But that's why they played. Anyway, the Hawks were huge underdogs coming in. They were 14-point underdogs in this game. Ended up losing by a lot more than that, but it did not matter. I'll leave with that right now. This game was not meaningful. Now, Indiana had to I shouldn't say they had to. They were trying to win, clearly. They played their guys. They had incentive to win. The Hawks had none of that, so keep that in mind throughout this entire thing. But the Hawks were down 13-2 right away in this one. Bruno Fernando had a rough one across the board. He had 2 shots blocked right away by Miles Turner, committed a foul immediately. Indiana was hot in the early going, and they made 13 of the first 15 shots. The Hawks actually had a 7-0 run early in the game and still were down 31-15 at the end of about 7 minutes. So defensively, it was an adventure all the way through this game. Rotationally, as we'll get to later on, they didn't play Kobe Buffkin or Trent Forrest till the very end of the game. So it's basically 9 guys who played in the competitive-ish portion of this contest. They played Trae the entire first and the entire third quarters. That's been something that they've done a lot in the past. This year, it's been more DeJounte doing that. I have a feeling, based on today, they might do that again on Wednesday. We won't know that until that actually happens. But keep an eye on that. The Hawks were switching a lot of actions defensively when Bruno was off the floor because they had to play Mo Gay at center. Now, Mo Gay was one of the bright spots in this game. That's something Quinn said post-game. I agree with that. But Mo Gay has not played in center all year long. In fact, this is always an interesting topic because people don't really follow along. Mo Gay is the tallest player on the team. I understand that. Mo Gay is not a center. And the Hawks have said that repeatedly. He's listed as a forward everywhere. Quinn post-game today, after he played center, said that he was playing quote-unquote wing in College Park. He's not a center. At least not right now. But as Quinn noted, and I will say the same thing, it helps to have a guy who's 6'11", just for versatility's sake. And without Clint, and of course Onyeka being hurt, and Jalen being hurt, he had to play center. There was no way Bruno was going to play 48 minutes in the game, so they had to play somebody there. And I think that was why that transpired. Anyway, he had a career high immediately in this one. Of course, he hasn't played a lot, but a lot of good flashes for him. Good stuff on offense in particular, using the space created by him playing center, kind of having a true 5-out look for Atlanta in this game. There was some foul trouble issues. He had 3 fouls in about 40 seconds. Now, I will say generously to him, I think 2 of those were probably not fouls, but part of being a young player is getting fouls you probably shouldn't get and kind of learning that craft along the way. Anyway, he had some nice moments along the way still. But the Hawks allowed 49 points in the first quarter on 74% shooting. Not a misprint. That's the quarter, not the half. Rough stuff. The offense was objectively good, and they were down by 15 points at the end of the first quarter. There was one big, nice run for Atlanta in this game, a 17-3 run in the second quarter to go from down 14 to tied. And they were actually down by as many as 16 in that first half. Erased that whole deficit, and they were back in the game. DeJounte was a big part of that. He was scorching hot. He had 18 points in about 8 minutes to begin second quarter. He had 20 in the second quarter overall. He was aggressive, getting downhill. Good stuff from him in that stretch. But then after that, Indiana went on a 14-0 run, and it was never super close after that again. The Hawks had about a 133-ish offensive rating in the first half, which is very, very good. And they were down by 14 points because they allowed 86 points on 56 possessions in the first half. That's more than 1.5 points per trip defensively, and you just cannot win when that happens. Part of that was Indiana was red hot, but still defensively it was a bit of an adventure. Here's where we start talking about the player evaluation and sort of the player deployment. So Atlanta played the starters deep into the fourth quarter. I would have probably pulled the guys at halftime. I get why they didn't do that, but anyway, they were down 32 points at the end of the third quarter. There was not a lot of drama. It got really ugly really fast in the third. Trae had, of course, he was seeking the franchise record. So he had to have 10 assists to tie Doc Rivers for the all-time record for the Hawks in the game. He had to have 11 to break it. He had 7 in the first half, and then he tied it in like the first 4 minutes of the second half. So there was a real chance there. It felt like he was trying really hard to get it at the end of the third quarter, and Indiana was playing him to pass. Trae said post-game in an interview with Bob Rathman that he kind of felt that Indiana knew, and Indiana was telling him that they knew, and they were trying to stop him from getting it. So, like, he was being defended to not allow assists, basically, in the third quarter. But they got Trae back in the game in the fourth quarter, presumably to get the record. Also, maybe to have some more minutes, but the record's probably pretty important there. He finally got it in the fourth quarter. That was the only reason to bring him back in the game, honestly. He set up DeJounte for a 3. That was kind of nice, a moment there at the end. Doc Rivers had the record for 33 years. He broke it. He sort of set it in 1991. Trae now has that record for career assists for the Hawks, and he did it in 6 seasons, and he's 25 years old. So pretty impressive stuff there across the board. The franchise has been in existence for like 7 decades, and Trae is the all-time leader again at the age of 25. Pretty cool stuff. By the way, though, there was a timeline after that, and they left Trae and DeJounte in the game still, down by like 35 points. I don't understand. If you're a listener to the podcast regularly, you will know that I often quibble with Quinn about like blowouts and handling of players at the end of blowouts. He always I shouldn't say always, almost always leaves guys in longer than I would, generally speaking. This one I found particularly kind of insane, to be honest with you. I don't want to make too much of it, but they brought Bogey back into the game. He was already out of the game. He came back in with like 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I don't have any idea why. The game was over, like over at that point in time. Murray played till the 7-minute mark. I just don't understand. Again, They played Trae and DeJounte 30-plus minutes in this game, and it didn't mean anything. It was blowout. I don't really get it. But anyway, I'll leave it alone for now. But I just want to note my objection to the way that was handled in the second half. But they were down by as many as 44 points in the fourth. They lost this game by 42 points, and it was pretty rough. Indiana flirted with like all-time NBA history. They didn't quite get there scoring-wise, but they had I believe it was a franchise record or at least something like that for regulation. The Hawks allowed a bazillion points in this one. We'll get into kind of some of the takeaways from the observations of stats in this game, et cetera, in a second. But let's just say the defense was really rough in this game, and offensively it was pretty good for a while, and then it kind of got off the rails, and that was the end of that. So, all right, we'll leave it there for now. We'll have more on the player evaluations as well as my big picture takeaways from this game and more. But first, a word from our friends at PrizePicks. At PrizePicks, you can win up to 100 times the money on your entries with just as little as 4 correct picks. That's right. For example, turn $10 into $1,000 with entry today on a PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. They have something for every sports fan, from basketball to hockey to League of Legends, everything in between. Also, PrizePicks is the best way to get on the action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. If you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players, you can also find them in the community plays. On the promos tab of the app, you entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each and every week. They have injury insurance as well. Your entries actually stay in play even if one of your players happens to get injured. It's really simple to play there as well. I make like the picks just a minute entries, just 60 seconds or less. That's huge for me. One of the reasons that I've been playing at PrizePicks for quite a few years at this point in time. I really love it over there. They have quick withdrawals. They have easy gameplay and an enormous selection of stat types and players that you can't find anywhere else. That helps to make, I should say, the PrizePicks app the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the PrizePicks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Okay, and normally I would have given you some more detailed analysis of what the Hawks did well on offense and defense and the big picture stuff of the game itself earlier in the podcast than now. But number one, the game didn't mean anything. Number two, Vit Krejci stuff was actually pretty interesting, and people were asking about that all day long. And number three, again, it was pretty lopsided and gross in this game. So I'll stress again one more time: the Hawks knew this game didn't mean anything. They probably approached it as such. It's hard to be motivated when it actually doesn't really matter that much. I saw some of this. It was, I would say, probably mostly fringe stuff. People kind of complaining about the Hawks losing at the end of the season. The two previous games to this, the Hawks were winning the game when they basically stopped playing their regular guys. Tonight, they got killed. So I should say this afternoon, they got killed. That's notable. Indiana's been awful for them all year. They're now 0-4 against the Pacers this season. They cannot seem to stop them. I don't really care about that much because the chances of playing the Pacers in the playoffs are minuscule, but there you have it. Just for some numbers' sake here, before we move on to the individual player stuff in this game, Indiana had more than a 140 offensive rating, even though they kind of pulled it off in the fourth quarter. It was even higher than that. They had 41 assists. They had 26 fast break points. Miles Turner had 31 points and 12 rebounds in 22 minutes on the court in this game. Siakam had 28 points, 25 minutes. Like, I could go on. It was really ugly. Let's just say, I'll be honest with you. This is not me saying this is the huge impact in this game. The Hawks did not have a lot of center resistance in this one. Capella was missed. Okongwu was missed. Jalen was missed. Would that have fixed the problem? No, it would not have fixed the problem. But it was even worse than it probably would have been normally. The Hawks were actually really good on offense for part of this game, and then it fell off a cliff in the second half. That was a combination of playing worse players, of course, later in the game, but also just playing worse, running out of gas, etc. Once it got out of hand, it was kind of like an ejection a little bit for Atlanta, which is understandable, and a game that didn't matter. They also didn't make any shots in the second half. Notable there. But, yeah, I mean, you can't explain away a 42-point loss that easily. It is what it is. They just got blitzed. There were two good stretches in this game, a run in the first quarter and a run in the second quarter, and they actually won the second quarter of this game. But everything else was pretty dire. It was just a gross watch, like, especially for people like me that value defense. Like, this is just a hideous basketball game. Like, Indiana made a lot of shots, so obviously that helped for them. I'm sure their fans enjoyed it. But it was kind of a tough watch in a otherwise meaningless game for Atlanta. All right, to the player stuff quickly here before we get out of here. I said it before, probably the biggest bright spot was Mo Gay. 19 points, 9 rebounds. It was a career high for him. He had 3 blocks, 4 of 8 on twos, 2 of 3 on threes. Very active. The flashes are very real. He certainly had some rookie moments in this game, but it's not hard to see what the Hawks have liked about Mo Gay. It's been kind of a lost year for him development-wise because he hasn't been able to play a lot because of the injuries. Hopefully those are behind him, knock on wood, on the back stuff in particular. But clearly the future is very bright for Mo Gay. There's a chance, especially with Vit now unavailable, that they could try Mo Gay on Wednesday. I wouldn't say it's likely to happen. I wouldn't even say it's guaranteed to happen or anything like that. But given their lack of size, it would no longer stun me. If you asked me 2 weeks ago if Mo Gay was going to play in the play-in, I would have probably laughed. But given that Vit's not eligible and Jalen's out for the season, and Sadiq's already out for the season, and so is Okongwu's probably out for the season as well, we'll see. They may have to. If Hunter gets in foul trouble, there isn't a lot of depth there. So circle that. We may not have seen the last of Mo Gay this year. We'll see. But he was probably the brightest spot in this game. AJ Griffin was aggressive with a shot. I like to see that. He didn't make a lot of shots, though. 8 points on 14 shots for AJ in this game. 0-5 from 3. Had a steal, had a block. It was up and down for sure for him. Garrison Matthews had 2 threes. He had a great year shooting the ball. That continued in this game. 2-5 from 3. That's kind of all he did. Vit was pretty quiet other than some nice defense on Halliburton, I thought, a couple times. Had 5 assists, didn't score in 22 minutes. Obviously we'll talk about him more often, but I liked a lot of what I saw from Vit the last 6 weeks, basically. I wish he was eligible to play this week in the play-in, but for him, career-wise, a huge, huge step forward to be firmly in a rotation for that long, produce well, show off his defensive improvement, the passing, the connectivity. Like, he doesn't need the ball to be successful. I always like guys like that. So, like, a huge step forward for him. Hopefully he can parlay that into a real contract going into the next year, etc. Buffkin and Forrest were both quiet. They didn't play till the very, very end. Kind of all garbage time there for those guys. DeJounte had a big game, 32 points in 31 minutes. He actually had 20 points in the second quarter alone. He was really hot at that stretch. All the stars got killed in this game. They were all minus 24 or worse. So, like, what are you going to do about that? Bogey didn't shoot it super well. 18 points on 15 shots. Did make 3 threes. I'll say it one more time here. I think Bogey should be, if not the front runner for 6th man of the year, he should be high on the list. Nothing changes about that tonight. Hunter had a brutal game. I thought Bruno we'll get to in a second, was worse. But if not for Bruno, I would have thought Hunter was, like, notably pretty bad in this game. 6 points on 0 of 6 from the floor. 2 rebounds, 1 assist in 27 minutes for Hunter. And it looked bad. It felt bad. Like, he did not play well. And I'll just sort of foreshadow this a little bit for Wednesday. Hunter's got to play 40-plus minutes of power forward. He's the only guy they really trust right now that can play the power forward spot. That's kind of what I got into earlier with Mo Gay. Like, it's Hunter, and then it's a wasteland after that. So he has to be better than this. I'm sure everybody knows that. It's a meaningless game, but he was not good in this game. Speaking of not good, Bruno Fernando got absolutely obliterated by Miles Turner. Bruno's had some nice moments recently. I think offensively, Bruno has had a pretty good year, honestly, on the whole. He's a good finisher. He's got good hands, etc. But defensively, it's the last couple weeks especially left a lot to be desired. I like Bruno. Everyone likes Bruno. He's a really good guy. He was really, really bad in this game. Miles Turner took it to him the entire time. Defensively, the effort wasn't particularly great for Bruno either in this one. So, again, meaningless game, but he's going to have to play in the play-in, and they're going to have better from him because Capella's been really good lately. He's going to play as much as he probably can in these playing games, but Bruno's got to play some minutes, and hopefully he's better than he was tonight. And then Trae, 12 points, 12 assists. He was not particularly good, honestly. Had eight turnovers, minus 35. Like, wasn't good, but the most important thing with Trae is that he is healthy and back on the court. Obviously, the French record, we talked about the record already, but we'll leave it there for now. I think that I was worried, honestly, since the game's over now, I can say this out loud, that the Hawks were going to have somebody get hurt in a meaningless game, and that didn't happen, so that's a positive. Yeah, all speed ahead to Wednesday, and we'll leave it there for now. Oh, one more note on Bogey that I forgot to share. Bogey made a 3 in every game that he played this year. His streak is now 90 consecutive games with a 3. That is the 6th longest streak in the history of the NBA. So pretty impressive stuff there for Bogey on an otherwise meh season for Atlanta. All right, so Wednesday is the next thing on the agenda for the Hawks. It's the 9-10 game. How about this? It is wildly at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time in Chicago. Now, why is that late at night? I got questions about that immediately as I broke the news on Twitter on Sunday. Well, it's because of the Sixers. It only would have happened if Philly was exactly the 7 seed, but Philly is exactly the 7 seed. Basically, the NBA had to move the schedule around because Philly shares their building with the Flyers in the NHL, and the Flyers already had a game on the schedule at home on Tuesday. So the entire schedule had to change. Philly now plays Wednesday, and both the East games are Wednesday. Both West games are now on Tuesday. And with Chicago being in the Central Time Zone, that's the late game because Philly's in the Eastern Time Zone. So that essentially all pushes the Hawks to a 9:30 game on Wednesday. And then if they win, I would assume it'll be an early game on Friday in either Philly or Miami because we will know now who the Hawks play on Wednesday by the time they start playing on Wednesday. Philly and Miami play in Philly in the 7-8 game. The loser of that game plays either the Hawks or the Bulls. So I won't preview that a lot because we won't know about anything that happens there. The Hawks have to win, and then we'll see. But if it was me, this is just me now, if I was a Hawks fan and I wanted the Hawks to do well in this tournament, I would root for Philly to win because I think Miami is much more beatable than Philly with Embiid back. Doesn't mean the Hawks can't beat Philly because they definitely can, but I'd rather face Miami personally. So anyway, we'll get into that later on. We'll have a preview, at least one, maybe two previews of Hawks Bulls between now and Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. I have a couple things planned in the meantime, but all speed ahead to Wednesday's game. That's a win or go home for Atlanta. So if the season ends on Wednesday, you will know why, because they lost on Wednesday. We'll see. Stay tuned, everybody. Please subscribe to the podcast. I will have a full week of content no matter what, in advance of the game, after the game. As soon as the season ends, we'll pivot into post-game and postseason, I should say, and then off-season mode, but we do not go away at any point. So go ahead and subscribe to the podcast and spread the word about the show and tell a friend or two or three friends, family members, etc. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, like, rate, review, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. I also write about the Hawks and I share some Braves audio and some press conference stuff at patreon.com/BT Rowland. One more time, that's patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thanks for your support there, everybody. Anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast. I really do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun over 82 games. We'll have more to come. We'll see you next time.